Hi, and welcome to the second portion of the webinar. My name is Stan Engelbrecht, D3 Security. We're going to walk you through the configuration area within the D3 SOAR platform. Configuration area is essentially administration portal, allows you to set up your users, your playbooks, integrations, commands, and a number of other things. So we're going to walk through this and give you a really good in-depth overview as to how the platform is administered and what the additional capabilities there are within the platform itself. So the SOAR wizard here allows you to get started in a quick and easy way. It gives you the ability to set up the platform and get it ready to use. We're going to talk about each one of these areas here individually. So a site is considered a tenant within the environment. It's how you can actually have different departments working in different areas and not have any data bleed over or worry about data heading into the wrong places. It's also what MDRs and MSSPs will use to segregate their clients into different environments. So clicking on a site gives me the ability to look at the site details, as you can see here, as well as any users that are part of that particular site as well. And this gives the admin the ability to add or remove users as required. Groups within the environment allow us to go and take users and put them into various, obviously, groups within the system. But groups gets used further on in terms of additional access controls. So we can use this for notifying a particular group of users in the system, but we can also use it to segregate off data actually within an incident or in other areas. So it has multiple different uses within the tool itself. A role within the platform is designed around what the user can see and has access to in terms of the modules that you see across the top. So for example, in this particular admin role here, I have the ability to take a look at giving access into general administration. You'll notice here that I can control who's got access to what within the actual configuration module that I'm in, and then also as well as the operational modules here. So this particular area gives us fairly granular level access in terms of what we want this particular role to do, what they can see, and what they can't see. Lastly, when they're getting systems set up, you have to add users into the platform. So each particular user is required to have at least one site. They need to be required to have at least one group, and they can only have up to one role within the environment. So taking a look at a user, if I go ahead and click on them, I get an overview of what that user's capabilities are, what data points they have here within the system, whether they're active or not, the role that they maintain, their groups, their sites, time zone, as well as the security level, which leads a bit more into the case management side of the platform itself. Moving on to setting up playbooks fairly quickly in the environment, this gives us the ability to click on a site and then look at the available out-of-the-box playbooks that we can add into that particular site simply by check marking off that particular area and essentially importing the playbook into that particular site. So this gives us a way to control which out-of-the-box playbooks we want contained in which particular site. Again, as I mentioned before, a site gives the ability to segregate off various areas of the tool, including the types of playbooks that you want to have available into that particular tenant. I'm going to head down into add integrations now. Adding integration into the system gives us the ability to look at an app store here where I can now essentially choose the integrations that I may want. So I can take a look at ones that are included in the platform. I have a search capability up here, so if I wanted to look for a particular resource or a particular item, I can search for it. And then hovering over top of areas gives me the ability to look at the actions that are included within that particular item. So as I move through the tool here, for example, if I grab virus total and I click on the virus total app, you can see here, this one's already been installed into the system. There's various keys that are functioning here. And then I can also click over and see what actions are supported in an out-of-the-box manner here for this particular integration. Setting default integrations within the platform gives us the ability to actually set what we consider an actual integration that may be considered generic or default actually within the system. So for example, if I wanted to use virus total across all of my connections as that particular item, I can choose that key and I can go ahead and set this particular item in its various locales. And I can do this for multiple different types of generic actions when I'm dealing with them in the playbook area upon setting up an actual playbook. Global lists gives us the ability to actually set different types of lists that I can use for various different areas. So in other words, if I want to add a critical assets list into the system that I maybe want to use in a playbook as a comparison, it gives me the ability to do this here. If I want to whitelist either files or domains or other areas that maybe people are reporting on that I want to compare against to streamline workflow, I can do that here as well. Another use for global lists is if I'm running a vulnerability scanner and I want to import an asset list into the system, I can use global list to contain that asset list and then use it among other areas. Lastly, general configuration. There's two items in here. One is being able to set the SMTP server up, and the next one is actually being able to set your SLAs up in the system. So there's an SLA task that's built within the playbook side of things, and it gives us the ability to actually use these and set timers out in various different areas. Now that we've taken a look at the overview area in terms of a guided setup, we're going to look at a little bit, a couple other things here actually. User management for one. So user management gives us the capability to look at the various roles, groups, and users just in a quicker format. So after we've gone through guided setup, we have the same capability to look at the users, but again in a more compacted way. Same thing with roles, as well as groups and sites. So we're not going to spend a huge amount of time on here, but you get the idea that we can actually adjust these particular areas here from the user management section as well. Application settings brings us into the back end of the tool a little bit more, which for this particular webinar, we'll skip over. We're going to spend the majority of our time here in the last few areas to really take a look at a deeper dive in terms of the playbook itself and what we can do within each particular playbook. So let's go ahead and drop into the editor and get a good overview in terms of what a playbook looks like within the D3 environment. So a playbook can be started from scratch, or out of the box default ones can be applied. Now, a playbook within D3's environment is really based on an end-to-end style of investigation. So it carries with it a lot of different things. It isn't just a singular action or a run book. It really is designed to house the entire life cycle of an investigation. So depending on what's required, it may just be that the life cycle is simply a detection analysis into a notification. It may be all the way through to remediation as well as post-incident within the environment. So we're going to dissect what the different components here are of an actual playbook within D3 structure. So you'll notice here I've got various colored boxes, and each particular one pertains to a building block here on the right-hand side. So we're going to start first with the interaction tasks. So interaction tasks gives us the ability to build out question and answer forms that we can put in various different ways to guide our analysts through the investigation. So an interaction task can house read-only text areas. It can house long questions, shorter question answers, gives us the ability to actually use HTML text in the questions as needed, as well as set up radio boxes, drop downs, and checklists. So this gives us a really good way to be able to track items that may be more manual for an analyst to follow. For example, providing a list of questions they have to ask a user and record their answers in the system. It's just one of the uses for an interaction task. They can also be used for approval processes. If I need to go and have a manager take a look at something prior to the workflow being sent on, and various questions have to be answered there as well. So interaction task does give us the ability to actually put these directly into the workflow of a playbook. Next item in the list is your command task. So this or conditional task. The conditional tasks are used to make comparisons to inputs into the system. So conditional tasks can be used in various different ways. I can set it up in a manual fashion by uncheck marking the auto run box, or I can use it to actually grab inputs from other particular tool sources within the system. So for example, if I wanted to grab the input from a URL reputation check in terms of this particular area, I have the ability to do that. I can use the risk leveling field here and use this as an input into this conditional task and then either compare it or set up a type of condition where I can just essentially take a number and use that as a way to compare items as a high risk or low risk or medium risk item, and then choose which particular area it's going to go to. Third item in the list is your command task. Command task houses all different types of integrations that we house within the platform. As I mentioned before, in the setup area, your generic action gives you the ability to set those particular defaults and use them as a standard out of the box integration. If I wanted to jump into more detail here, I can take a look at this particular task, which is getting host information out of Active Directory. Clicking on the three dots there supplies me ability to actually get into the tool and take a look at what items are available here in terms of all the different types of actions I can take. Currently within the environment, there's just over 1,500 different types of actions across all the integrations within the environment. So let's take a look at what we have for Active Directory. You notice this one is get AD user information. That applies this particular integration right here. So clicking on the integration gives us more detail, it gives us our input fields, it'll give us our key value fields that are going to be part of the output that we can pass to other tasks, as well as any type of context data that will be coming back from that. These particular command tasks that are housed within this give me the ability to use them in a very codeless fashion. So selecting the integration will provide me the command there. The next thing I simply need to supply is the actual input for that item. Inputs can be done in various different ways. Most of the time, we want to grab that information from an event that's come in. So part of the default mapping within the system gives us the ability to grab the usernames as a standard input from the event that's been brought into the system. The only thing I need to do is grab that particular username from the event space, map it into the system here, and once that's completed, I can simply hit finish, and this will then move this into the input area. Last thing to do is to go and actually grab the connection, which is part of another setup area, which I'll go into shortly. Once this is done, I can complete that, and that action is now set and ready to go once the playbook is initiated in the actual incident area. The light green box here, which is REST API task, gives us a bridge between the codeless commands that are found within the command task versus coding your own, possibly using Python or a webhook or some other typical area. REST API task gives me the ability to actually set my parameters, put my URL in, grab a REST method, and then build my JSON body and header into the system and use it as a custom REST task to a tool set that we may not have an integration with, or maybe an internal tool that you simply want to build it out. It allows us the flexibility to provide another method that isn't completely coding from scratch, that can be easily used and maintained by users of the system here. The stage task here, which is the large orange one, is a way that we can actually pull out different areas and actually coordinate the playbook and make it easier to understand. Stage tasks can be renamed to anything that's needed. They can be activated automatically, or they can simply be manually set to run. It gives the ability to supply a description as well as instruction area for the analyst. It's really used as an organizational item within the structure of a playbook. The SLA task refers to timers that can be set in terms of how long a certain stage may take or a task may take. Gives us the ability to grab these types of items, set a certain SLA that we were able to configure in the other area, and then use it in each particular playbook. These also will be maintained within the actual structure of the actual incident and can be reported on in the metrics and reporting area. Lastly is pass down task. Pass down task gives us the ability to grab the overall output for a playbook and actually transfer that output into another playbook that may get run. Another thing to note with playbooks is that while I can structure a playbook like this, each particular item or command task can actually be linked to a nested playbook. So I can actually build sub playbooks with smaller commands to actually use within this particular fashion, and so that I can use smaller building blocks for larger sets of actions within the environment. Up here, you'll notice that I've got the ability to edit, test, set a playbook to live, and publish it off into different sites. Going into test mode will allow me to test the playbook out, and taking it out of test mode will actually then delete the data so that it doesn't affect the metrics from the actual production environment if that's where we need to test items. Setting it to live makes the playbook available within the environment. And publishing this allows me to publish it across different types of sites. That way I can control which playbooks are part of which tenant, and I don't have to worry about having a playbook that runs across all tenants if I don't need it. Each particular playbook in the environment will automatically have a history and a versioning control within the system here. So each time a playbook is changed or set to a live area or published, you'll get another versioning history. Couple things we can do here. One is export this particular version out to import into another D3 system. This gives us the ability that if we're using both a demo or a dev environment and a production environment, we can do all of our testing in dev and then publish the playbooks within the production area. Cloning gives us the ability to actually clone the playbook in this particular environment and use that for any adjustments that we may want to make, and then to seamlessly switch over from one playbook to the other as required. We're going to move down now into the integration area here and take a look at a couple different ways that we can go and set connections up within the system. So setting up connectors is designed around the ones that we already have integrated. I'm going to actually stick to the setup integrations and automation rules here for this particular part of the webinar. This is a more granular area that we saw that is related to the marketplace. So if I wanted to find a particular integration, I can go ahead and populate it into this particular area. And maybe for this demo, let's go ahead and stick to VirusTotal. Searching this gives me the ability to pull up the VirusTotal API along with all of the out-of-the-box integrations that we have configured here. We have a couple different areas. One is the ability to set a new connection parameter. So if we need to set a particular connection for a tool, that gives us the ability to do this here. And then setting up a connector gives us again the ability to look at what we may need for a particular connection. So depending on the tool set that you're using, it may be very simple, such as simply the server domain and an API key. Other ones will require more information. If you're going into something like Gmail or Office 365, you'll likely need more information, such as client ID, client secret, and a number of other areas. Again, in here, it gives us a number of areas that we can set and select. Configure user permissions allows us to go and set which users or owners of this connection can actually use it. This way I can actually restrict what types of integrations are used across what clients and who actually has access to them. The active button will tell us that this particular integration is active. Testing the connection will allow us to test to whether or not the two tools can actually see each other. And I can actually select this to clone this across multiple different tenants, so I don't have to set up an integration across every single tenant on its own. This actually allows me to go and clone it across multiple tenants at once. The ability to use this for IP, URL, and file checks allows us to actually use these outside of what would be considered a regular playbook. This area here is actually based on the event level items that come in. So we can actually do system IP, URL, and file checks based on the file hash for the file check directly within an event without actually even having to run a playbook to do those checks on the artifacts that come in. Moving down a little bit farther, I can see different actions that are available within the environment that are mimicked over here as well. Clicking on one of the actions, such as detonate file, will then bring me into the environment here where I can test the action, set a connector, and add a new connection within the environment. We're going to take a look at an ingestion item within the environment here. So I'm going to choose Azure Sentinel. Azure Sentinel is used mainly as an ingestion item within the system. I can use it to fetch incidents directly into that particular area. And for extra context, I'm going to take a look at some items here regarding field mapping within the actual environment itself. Field mapping allows us to look at what items are actually going to be mapped directly into the environment. This one is the incident field mapping. And if I look at the mapping for other items in here, it gives them the ability to go and set or add additional information within these environments. This one here is blank, doesn't have a default mapping right now. We'll take a look at another tool. Searching on Splunk gives the ability to take a look at now what other items and field mappings I have here. Default mappings in terms of Splunk give us the ability to look at the fields that are brought in at the event level and map directly into the tool. These types of mappings can be edited. You can add different sources. I could have multiple different ones that come down within the system here to give me the ability to look at different data streams from the same source and mapped into different events. I can also define my own items within the environment here as well. Clicking on one of these particular areas, I can look at the source type, which is the field, and where it's mapped to in the D3 data structure. Dropping this down here gives the ability to look at different types of ways of getting data. Having the ability to use regex directly into the system here, I can use regular expressions to actually search through free-form text for certain fields that may require additional work for mapping into the event space. Additionally here, gives us the scheduled area, allows us to set scheduled jobs up for things like ingestion or running vulnerability scanning playbooks directly into the system. Clicking on this area gives the ability to take a look at the fetch action event, the connector that it's doing, whether it's active or not, and what the time interval is for the ingestion, as well as being able to put in search criteria and across the number of top recent events, as well as different types of artifact texts. This way, I can control where I'm looking and what I'm looking for and what I want to bring into the system. Moving into automation rules here. Automation rules allows us to actually set rules up for different areas based on the events that are coming in. Two different types of rules, dismissal and escalation. Dismissal allows me to go and set a condition set for that particular rule that I may want to go and adjust. For example, maybe there's a certain event type that comes in that I know is always going to be a false positive or something that I want to set to take a look for to always dismiss it. This gives me the ability to set this so that the analysts don't need to worry about certain events coming into the system if there's no way to filter them out other than when they come in as an event. Escalation rules, on the other hand, are rule sets that we can set up to take a look at different types of items in terms of how I want to go and handle them coming into the system. So for example, if I want to use that same event type, I can use an event type, set it to a particular condition, maybe for example, phishing, as my event category, and then set additional rules to decide what I want to do with those events. I could set a time frame to say over top of 3 days, take every single event that has the same email subject line and use a unique event code when the count is greater than 2. This will take all these particular items over top of the 3 days with an account greater than 2 and search from the top 5, and I can amalgamate them into a single incident as I move through the system. Classification rules gives us an additional area here where we can actually move more events into a single incident. Going further down, we're going to look at commands within the system. Commands is an area that we've got a lot of built-in different types of utilities within the D3 platform. The basic utilities can be anything from adding strings to absolute values to adjusting what happens within a JSON array. These are some pretty in-depth values that I can use here, but utility commands can be used for many different things. For example, send email is one such utility command that we can simply use out of the box and actually set this up within a playbook to send out different types of emails from the system. Various other utility consistent commands are available within the environment. There's close to 300 of them currently within the system. The nice thing about commands is I also have the ability to go and set my own custom commands within the system. For example, if I wanted to add a certain custom command, I can go ahead and simply name the command, and then I have the ability to actually code or script my own from scratch. This provides the analysts and people in the clients, I should say, with the ability to actually use a IDE environment to script their own Python commands directly into the system and test it here within this space and not have to worry about running it outside of the platform. Additionally, this is also where we can drop this down, go to a codeless playbook, and actually set up a nested playbook from within this environment. You'll notice here, if I go back into the editor, I'm now am looking at the same editor as the overall general playbook, but this is where I can set up all my nested commands to use as a singular command within that particular environment. The incident form editor provides us a quick and easy way to actually use different types of incident forms. It's also the area where we want to classify what type of an incident we're dealing with. So for example, if I click on the playbook for phishing, you'll notice I'll have my type, which I can initiate a brand new one just by clicking new and starting from scratch. I then can actually build out different dynamic form items directly into the system here. For example, this one has a detection analysis based on NIST and different types of categories and questions regarding this particular NIST area here for detection analysis. These types of forms can be completely controlled by the client. If I want to add something brand new, I can simply click on this, drag in a brand new section. I can name the section whatever I want to. For example, if I want to add a post-incident area, and then use the building blocks directly into the system. For example, this one here, post-incident for phishing, I now have the ability to use both new activity as well as new info activity within the environment. New info activity gives me the ability to set different types of field items. For example, text boxes, text areas, again, searchable texts, as well as label controls and various other system fields that we can use to build out different form level data within the environment. I can also use new activities, which give me the ability to use drop-downs, checklists, radio boxes, and others to set up additional form and dynamic areas within the environment. This gives the flexibility within the platform that if I've got compliance forms or other items that have to be filled out, a space to actually do that directly within the incident area. In the playbook here, we can also decide what we want for our default playbook based on this particular incident type. Setting a default playbook means that when an event is triggered, it'll automatically run that particular playbook as soon as that particular incident type is set. So going back to the automation rules, if I have an event set to automatically escalate into a certain incident type, it'll initiate that particular playbook task to run automatically without any analyst having to intervene with it. Lastly, within the configuration area is the global list configuration. This goes back to an area where I can now have the same capability of adding lists using different areas here that we may want to look at having built into conditional tasks, as well as other comparisons, or again, like as I mentioned, different types of assets that may be important to us to compare in a playbook or to check against. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you folks all in the third section of this particular webinar as we go through the last two areas, which is going to be reporting analytics as well as the MITRE ATT&CK dashboard.